everybody. Welcome to another edition of the Sales Development Podcast. I'm David Dulany, your host, and I'm joined today by a legend in our industry. Don't want to oversell you here, Matt, but this is a guy who has forgotten more about go-to-market, marketing, sales, customer success than I will ever know. One of the great minds in our industry, and Matt Heinz, founder and president of Heinz Marketing. I don't know if I did that right, but welcome aboard.
Good enough. Yeah. Thank you so much. It's a pleasure to be here. I was looking forward to it.
Yeah. And Matt, so just as a background, I met you probably 7 or 8 years ago, and you were at the Serious Decisions conference. Remember them?
I do remember.
That's how
I
far
missed
back.
them, by the way. Yeah.
What's that?
I missed them.
I know they were great.
Yeah.
They got subsumed as a lot of those companies do on a daily basis. And you were doing the rounds. I was working at Infer at the time,
Mhm.
which is another like what happened to them. But marketing technology, it's just exploded over the years, and you've been at the forefront of this transformation that has happened. Um, tell us about the work that you do, and how you came about to get involved in all this.
Oh, well, I mean, the long story is this has been a giant mistake, David. I was a journalism and political science major at University of Washington, and somehow ended up running my own business, helping people with marketing challenges. That's the long answer goes that far out. I think the shorter answer is I just become really, really interested in helping companies with complex go-to-market motions create more predictability out of those outcomes, right? I think the buying journeys that we are managing in B2B are getting longer. The buying committees are getting larger. The required integration of message and tool and sequence to be successful at cutting through the noise, to be successful at selling, is getting more complex, as is just the motions of going to market. Like, how do you get work done as a marketer, as a seller, when you have all these different tools you're managing, when you've got all these different channels you're trying to get done? And so out of that complexity, our firm really focuses on creating predictable, repeatable, scalable revenue outcomes for companies.
Oh my gosh. Easier said than done, right? And
Yeah.
it seems like people try to do it themselves, right? Because they're hired by the company to be this marketing guru genius who's going to rocket ship their results, and they kind of buckle down and try to do everything themselves. And when do they finally go, oh my God, help? And they
Yeah.
call
Well, I mean, I actually think that companies should know how to do this themselves. I mean, we are project-based consultants that want our clients to be independently successful at doing this. I think most of our clients are in growth mode, in scale mode, and they need sort of the mastery of these complex motions to create predictable pipeline. They need that to be an internal core competency. So I see a big part of our job is to teach them how to do it, is to bring a proven methodology to bear, to customize that to unique nature of every company, build a go-to-market system, and then walk alongside them as you launch it, implement it, fine-tune it, and then teach that organization how to run it themselves. And that doesn't mean we go away. We can continue to sort of, make fine-tuning and adjustments along the way. But I think this is something that companies need to know how to run to be successful at scale.
Holy cow. But I mean, because it's changing so fast
Yeah.
and it's so difficult, and I don't want to scare anybody who's new to the podcast. Get out of this right now. But it's so difficult to be able to set this up and do it, and then to be able to have a mentor and someone walking beside you. At some point, have you seen it where you're working with somebody and they become the mentor, and then it's like, okay, I can walk away and I feel good about where I'm leaving the
Yeah, there's never a full walk away, right? But I think that
company.
I want to get companies and get marketing leaders to the point where they know how to make those decisions internally. They know how to orchestrate the work being done as well as the go-to-market motions to get the repeatable, scalable results they need to have. Some of that is in the tactics of the work. Some of it's just in the framework of how to think about and triage what needs to get done. And the simplest way I can get someone started on that path is just to go learn as much as you can about your customer. Like every decision you are going to make, from the messaging you use to where the SDRs sit and what they do, to which technologies you need to put into place. Like every one of those decisions is going to be based on a deep, ongoing, dynamic understanding of your customer.
Okay.
And that there is a science and an art to doing that, to collecting that information, to separating the gossip from the laws of physics when it comes to your customers, having a really strong voice of customer program so that you are not just collecting feedback, but doing something about it and holding the organization accountable for that feedback you get. The more that you can focus on, the more successful all of the programs you have are going to be.
Okay, so let me. This is so interesting. This isn't what I wanted to ask you about, but this is so interesting because somebody will come to you like a CMO, or they've maybe worked with you before, and they go, Matt, here's the situation. Our pipeline is suffering, our brand is unknown, and we're
Mhm.
really struggling. Where do we, and I think you alluded to this, but it's like if you sat down with that person and you go, okay, where do we start?
Mhm.
Because it's such a complicated, mess of different factors that are in
Yeah.
place. Where do you even start with a situation like that?
Oh man. I mean, I think there's always, I'm trying to think of the right word. I mean, there's people that you have to sometimes resist just getting in and just fixing the weeds, right? Like, hey, let's go
Yeah,
see why our, Google ads aren't performing the way that they should, or why are we not getting better response rate on these emails? And there might be some little tactical things you could do, but you might be improving response to the wrong prospects, right? So like one of the first questions I ask is like, how well do you understand who your very best customers are?
hmm
Like, so how well have you defined your ideal customer profile based on what you know about your best, most successful customers and what you know about the market opportunity that exists outside of you, outside of your company, where you have the best chance of winning, where you have the best chance of succeeding in acquiring those customers, but also succeeding in making those customers successful as well. And I find a lot of companies don't have something that is truly defined and followed, or they have something that is too shallow of a definition. Like if you say, well, we sell into mid-market healthcare companies, not good enough. What are the more detailed criteria? What are the psychographics that makes some companies in that market more likely to be successful with you than others? And so the more you can narrow that definition, that doesn't mean those are the only people you'll sell to. But if you can build your product, let alone your go-to-market motion, based on a very narrow, tight, specific, followed by all definition of your target market, now we can go optimize programs and channels with that audience in mind.
Okay. And so do you find that they come to you with like tactical problems and can you tweak this? Can you do that? And then you kind of pull it back and realize it's actually that strategy that's
Mhm.
the problem and the depth of their understanding that's the problem. Not and then we can go back and fix the tactical things based on that. And
Yeah.
do they ever okay, I'm just extrapolating, but do they ever come to you and go, Matt, we don't have time for all this strategy, beep.
Yeah.
Let's just fix our Google ads right now. And
Yeah.
what do you say? Yeah.
Well, there's
That's
believe I mean we get this question a lot, right? Why does it have to take so much time? Why can't we just go in and fix some things? Why can't we get some quick wins? Well, like I said, you can optimize your Google ads, but are your customers on Google? Are your target buyers spending time on Google? If they are, what are they looking for? Are you engaging in the right keywords? Are these the right phrases that reflect what they're thinking about and working on? So I think again, like if you don't know who you're selling to, then it's going to be hard to get the tactics right. You have a strategy first, process second, implementation third. Implementation is everything from channel to technology to automation to what have you, right?
okay.
Um, so I think you have to have that center. And I've seen a lot of companies like not really think very strategically and deeply enough about their customers. Or like earlier today, I had someone say, well, we'll have our target account list soon. Sales is going to hand it to us. I'm like, based on what criteria? Is it because they've got relationships? Is it because they're in a Rolodex? Is it because they're the bright, shiny objects? Like, we have to have a more disciplined way of understanding who we're selling to be successful down the road into execution.
Okay. And then, from an organizational perspective, there's silos. There's, as you know, I'm like talking to the master of marketing and explaining that. No, there's silos that you see within companies, obviously, where it's still set up in a very, the same it was, 20 or 30 years ago, where there's marketing and then there's SDRs and then there's sales and customer success. And it's like you're coming in saying, okay, we need to first understand our customer and really why they purchase or who they are and their voice, and then go through that. But then do you ever run into where these silos are not necessarily, talking to each other and wanting to play ball? So you're trying to implement this strategic solution and, the sales guys don't want to do it, or somebody, isn't cooperating.
I mean, it's worse. So yeah, we see that all the time, and it's worse than that. Not only do they not coordinate their efforts to get together, they argue about who gets credit.
Yeah.
Right. Like when you've got a 9 to 12 month sales cycle, let's not pretend that the white paper generated the deal, right? Any more than the 22-year-old's persistence to get someone on the phone. It's a body of work that generates the deal. So I think, worrying about attribution, worrying about who gets credit is too often a political game. And look, the best way to go to market, the most successful companies in B2B have a tightly orchestrated, integrated, omni-channel approach to their go-to-market. The right message to the right prospect at the right time is what wins. Doing that is complicated. It's harder than just saying, well, email team, you do your thing, and direct mail team, you go do your thing, and field marketing events team, do your thing. But if you don't coordinate that effort, you're going to spend way more money than you should. You're going to confuse your prospect, and it's just going to be a mess. You're not going to see nearly the results that you want and need.
Okay. And so I'm going to go way out on a limb, and put on our, guru hat for a minute, and say, should there be a different org structure where there's like one person who is ultimately responsible for the coordination that you're talking about? Because what you see is a lot of hot potato, in our business, where it's, nobody wants to manage the SDRs. That's for sure. No offense to everybody listening, but there's a lot of hot potato that goes on. And when I look at the organizations, it's almost what's missing is this one person who is in charge of the entire layer from start to finish. It was supposed to be the CRO, but then they are sort of, in a lot of times, the glorified VP of sales. And that's a totally opinionated statement, but should there be one person, if you could put on your philosophical hat, one person who's in charge of the organization, or
at least in charge of sort of revenue? Yeah. If we can get out of the echo chamber of B2B for a minute, like we don't have to invent this role. If you go to CPG, if you go to Procter and Gamble, like there's a role called brand manager for Tide. That is not the person that owns the pretty pictures in the advertisements. The brand manager owns Tide. Like, they're responsible for the P&L, they're responsible for the revenue, they're responsible for understanding where they are in the market and how to increase market share. So the brand manager plays that role and coordinates all of that together. I mean, traditionally marketing, we thought about it as product is the 4 Ps, right? Product, price, position, and placement and promotion. And too often right now, you got a B2B marketing leader that's just focused on promotion, right? So no wonder we're the glorified arts and crafts department. I am seeing some roles being created in organizations where you have that one person that owns it all and thinks about it all together. I look at someone like Latney Conant at 6th Sense. Her title now is CRO. She came through as the CMO. She was a CMO before she became Chief Revenue Officer. She owns marketing, sales, partner, customer success. Like, she owns all those things together and now has to think about brand versus demand, short-term versus long-term. Another friend of mine who was running marketing at Coupa, and was at marketing Marketo and others. He now has a title called Chief Go-to-Market Officer. So he also owns all of those pieces together. So I think it doesn't really matter what you call it, but you need someone that can think about those different functions together, someone that can that accurately balance the short-term and long-term needs of the business. Because you're right, I think some CROs, are just so focused on short-term sales, they're not thinking about long-term brand, long-term impact, long-term demand.
Yeah, and so um, what was it going? Okay. So that example that you gave about a go-to-market leader who's a true go-to-market leader,
Mhm.
one thing that's super important that it all comes down to is the product market fit,
Yeah.
or it is the product, and especially I work in like the startup world. So
Hmm.
is there product market fit? But then at bigger companies, there are multiple products being launched, and you could throw all the SDRs at it and all the salespeople and all the marketers. But if nobody wants the product, or the product's
Right.
got a bad reputation, then you're just throwing money out the window.
Right.
And so what's the relationship between this go-to-market leader and the product leaders and the people developing the products?
Yeah. Well, I mean, look, the whoever the go-to-market leader in it is in the organization, I think needs to be the closest and most knowledgeable about your customer. And that person needs to be informing what product roadmap includes. Like the better you can understand your customer, the better you can understand what they're willing to buy, what they need, how those needs change over time. It's really, really important that someone in the organization sort of really owns the market opportunity. And what I mean by that is like, how mature is the market? How mature is the industry? How well understood is the problem amongst which segments in the adoption curve, right? So the better you can understand that, I mean, you can make a spreadsheet, say anything about who you can sell to. But if the market is nascent and you're going to need to spend a lot more time educating, that has to be built into your model and your expectations of how fast you can grow. So, it's not just about sending more emails and making more phone calls. If you're fighting uphill against a market that's not ready and no one's really done the math or analysis to figure that out, you could be in a whole hurt and a whole heap of trouble and really not know why.
Yeah. And it's so interesting because, 18 months ago, or 2 years ago, when it was growth at all costs, and again, tech industry
Yeah.
focused, but
Yeah.
growth at all costs. And, you could even see companies that didn't really have a strong product market fit, but they're building these massive, go-to-market engines. And it's like that came to a screeching halt, it
Yeah.
seems. And now it's these very important aspects that you're talking about that have really come to the forefront, because it's either you get this right or you're going to be in really big trouble.
I think it's exposed programs that really don't have strong, fundamentals in place that got away with just selling to anybody and everybody, and then the pipeline was filled, but you really didn't know how and why. Or you had a great month, you had a great quarter, you had a great year, but what's your confidence that you can orchestrate that again? What's your confidence that sitting here day zero of a new quarter or new year, that you have the skills and the discipline and the priorities to hit that number plus 20, 30%, right? And I think that, if you don't start with a tight definition of who your target is, why they need you, where to find them, you're going to continue to struggle. But I think the companies that have put an investment and prioritization around those fundamentals, around knowing who they're selling to and following that across the organization, marketing, sales, customer success, etc. Those are the companies that have really excelled, despite what has been a sort of a challenging last year and a half or so.
I keep thinking back to, it's on my desk here, Busting Silos by the
Mhm.
team over at Snowflake, and they're like a shining example. I'm sure that they only show us all the good parts and stuff, but
Right.
it's one there. This is possible to do,
Oh yeah.
and you can try to do it yourself, or just call Matt Heinz and you'll help him. Okay, so this is I'm just fascinated by your thoughts. So we'll have to go do part two of this. But what I wanted to ask you about is, I initially met you at an event. We were in the
Mhm.
the golden age of events there
Yeah.
for a while. Serious Decisions, Gartner, Topo
Yeah.
put on amazing events. And obviously, COVID was a sort of a, nuclear winter there. But now events are starting to come back as a really,
Mhm.
and it's hard to track, the ROI from events. But to me, it feels like the B2B events are back. And
Mhm.
you put out some really interesting thoughts because you did, two or three events as Heinz Marketing, as a person attending or speaking, and
Mhm.
you came back with some really interesting thoughts. What are you seeing in B2B events that's working, and then, some not so much?
Well, I think people are clamoring to get back together.
Hmm.
And the when you look at the industry events like HIMSS in healthcare and RSA in cybersecurity,
Oh,
even the Forrester B2B Summit, which used to be the Serious Decision Summit, month and a half ago, it was packed. It was a lot of people, and so I think people are craving to get back together.
yeah.
But I think that we gotta if you think about events from an attendee, from a sponsor, from a producer standpoint, I think the bar is higher now for what people want to get out of those events, right? I mean, like just accessing content, we can do it here. We can do it on Zoom. I can do it on YouTube. If we're going to get people together in person, what's something unique you can do about being in person, right?
Yeah.
So think about the networking opportunity. Think about the face-to-face learning opportunity, the interactive components that would be difficult to impossible to replicate here. I also think I think for a lot of sponsors, you really got to think about the event as a component of a body of work campaign. I think too often people say, well, we're just going to be a gold sponsor somewhere and we're just going to put up our booth and hope the traffic comes to us. No, man, you got to think about how are we going to activate this event before, during, and after. I know some people that are managing events and that they have very specific criteria for what they're going to get from an ROI standpoint at the event. And almost 100% of that value is created after the event. The event itself, the invites to the event, the meetings set at the event, all of that is table setting for the conversions that happen after the event. And if you just hope that they're going to convert themselves, you're going to be in trouble.
Yeah, I mean, it's a big investment of time and energy. So I look at it from the sponsor's perspective and the attendee perspective. I recently attended one where they had a small, like sort of round table where everybody could cross talk depending on your role in the company,
Hmm.
which I thought was
Hmm.
really interesting. And then the afternoon was talks of
Yep.
20 to 25 minutes. And I remember going, and I've been around for a million years, but the reason that I'm here is to talk to the other attendees, really.
Yeah.
Because, like you
Yeah.
said, you can get the content. The content ended up being amazing, but what I really would have appreciated is more structured, networking as an introverted person, being able to have an excuse to go up and talk to somebody. And so, yeah,
Yeah, I agree with you. I call that the difference between having rows versus rounds in a conference room, right? I mean, like when you
yeah,
go in somewhere and everyone's in a rows facing forward, yeah, you're facing the stage, you're facing the speaker, but it's not a natural to even meet the people next to you. Versus when you're in on rounds, you literally are all facing each other. There's a conference a couple months ago, the Pavilion CMO Summit. I thought did a really nice job of this, where they would have like a 30-minute session on a topic. And some of those topics were followed by 20 minutes of table talk. And so literally at the end of every 30 minutes, there was there was a discussion guide for the table to have around that topic. Take it and personalize it. How did you feel about it? What would you do about this? What are you doing or not doing already based on this? So I thought it was a fantastic way of combining sort of great speakers and topics on stage who are experts in a topic, and then having people interact with each other on that front as well.
you really do. And then I remember this is going way back, but probably the one where I met you, they had the birds of a feather,
Mhm.
table topics, and that's where I met Carrie Cunningham, who's
Oh
like
wow, yeah.
a rock star. If you know
Hmm.
Carrie Cunningham, leave a comment. I remember meeting him at the Birds of a Feather thing. So that's
Hmm.
super important to be able to
Oh
do
yeah.
that. Also at SaaStr, they had a company called Brain Dates. And
Mm.
the Brain Dates is a very structured program where it kind of forces you to meet other people at the conference. So ways to build those relationships that you just can't get, in your house after
Yeah.
5 years.
Yeah,
Um,
yeah, and I think just
yeah,
knowing that, and for company, and if you're going to build it like that, that's got to be a strong part of your value prop for going, right? I
yeah,
think, and especially when you have a lot of people that are working from home and working remotely, you don't have the natural interactivity of people like you in the office. So it should be part of the value prop. I'm going to go to a conference, I'm going to learn, but I'm also going to build my professional network. So I'm also ongoing learning and masterminding with other people that have a similar job.
yeah. And the other thing for like if you're promoting an event is a lot of it is do the attendees look like people that are like me or
Yeah.
not like the look of my face but are they at the same level, are they
Hmm.
grappling with the same thing, are they in the same industry and stuff like that, because the CRO, no offense, but doesn't want to go to an SDR conference,
Right.
or an SDR wouldn't be able to relate to a CRO conference, so it's like you have to be super clear in your
Well, now you're talking about
positioning.
quantity versus quality too, right? Where it's like it's
Yeah,
not just about having more and more people in seats. Do you have the
yeah,
right people in seats? Do you have people
yeah,
that to your point have similarities with each other, where the networking is going to be better, right?
yeah,
So and I think you think about like what people say when people talk about what a great event, it usually comes down to interactions and logistics, right? Like
okay.
meeting other people and learning from them. Logistics meaning like, is there coffee available all the time? Is the food okay? I mean, like these things matter, to people to
Yeah.
get back out there.
Well, that's funny because I think one thing that sparked my interest was you posted that they went and created a cowboy hat, I think, at one of
Hmm.
the conferences. It might have been you or somebody else, but
Hmm.
there was a very bespoke,
Yeah.
literally bespoke, side thing,
Yeah.
creating a cowboy hat. And now you've got that, and you remember that conference.
Yep.
Other thing I want to ask you is from the sponsor perspective. You mentioned
Mhm.
RSA. So I
Mhm.
somehow talked my way into a free pass in RSA, even though I have nothing to do with the security industry. And I go down the elevator in Moscone Center, and there's
Mhm.
600 booths,
Mhm.
and Cisco and Splunk and all these humongous things. And as a person who arranges events and then also works with sponsors, how do you differentiate yourself in this sea of sponsors,
Yeah.
if you can't afford the gigantic booth at the
Well, I think it's whether you have a big booth or a small booth, the trade show floor is kind of like buying a lottery ticket. You're just hoping the right people walk by. And you think
uh,
about those enormous conferences, and it's like if you're selling to a subset of the market, and your best prospects are the CISO, the Chief Information Security Officer, or some other person, you're just hoping those people walk by. Like that seems that I mean, it could be that having a space on the floor is part of a broader package. It's sort of your ticket to ride, so you can be there. But if you're not setting up meetings in advance, if you're not creating some way to activate engagement with those people, like that picture that you probably saw on LinkedIn was at an event where, the number of attendees had been hand selected, personally invited to this event. They weren't just waiting for those people to come by their booth. They said, screw it, let's go rent a place and let them pick out a hat, right? A cowboy hat. So I think you have to activate proactively in advance, activate what you want out of that show, and don't just wait for people to come by. So that doesn't work very well unless it's a very, very narrowly selected audience. You're going to be challenged.
Yep, yep. And then, there's the I can't remember the name of the company, but there was companies that essentially they market that they're going to have a dinner where there's going to be CMOs of,
Mhm.
Fortune 50 companies. And if you want to seat at that as a vendor, you're going to have to
Mhm.
pay some ungodly amount of money. And I've always wondered, first of all, how do they get these CMOs of Fortune 50 companies? And then second of all, is it worth that? Because apparently it's a business that people
It
have
is.
doing those events. So that's another. I don't know if you know anything about that, but yeah,
I do. I do. I mean, like again, like the Fortune 50 CMOs, like how many of those do you actually have something to sell to? Which of them are more likely to be better prospects for you based on their industry, their business, their locality, etc. So if you don't know who's going to be in the room, you're paying for a small percent of the room that you probably like care the most about. So it's a challenge, right? I mean, it seems like it's just really easy. I'm just going to spend this money. I'm going to go get these meetings. Um, it's a mixed bag for the CMOs that attend. Some of them go because they're like, hey, listen, it's a really nice meal or it's a really nice experience. And, you get to be the belle of the ball. But then you got to put up with some pitches, right? And not all some of those pitches are well timed. Some of them are well played. Some of them are really bad. And if you're the sponsor, if you decide that you're going to play one of these, I think your best bet is to go in and just give people something that they would have paid for. Give them an insight, give them a reframe of a problem, teach them something new so that they want to take your call the next day. You're not going to sell them something in the room. This isn't a timeshare presentation. So your goal is to build some trust and credibility so they'll take your call the next day. If you apply that strategy, and you can be a little more successful in events like that.
Okay. And then that's just the entrepreneur in my head started to think, what if you applied the timeshare model to B2B and you just went out and said, I know you're laughing, but I'm serious. So you went out and said, hey, look, CMO of a Target account, I will fly you to Hawaii. I'll give you a week in a hotel, and all you have to do is take a meeting with me.
Mhm.
And you don't have to buy anything, but you just have to take the meeting. Could you make it work? Would that be just a ridiculous idea?
People do it all the time. I think you got to be
Oh,
careful. I mean, some companies
okay,
have rules around what kind of gifts they can accept from vendors. Because I mean, you could
okay,
make a really strong case. What you described, it could be a great way of getting the meeting. It could also be seen as a bribe. I
yeah,
guess you're not forcing the person to sort of buy anything. But I've seen companies do really interesting things. So like just to get someone's attention, people you say, hey, everyone come to this steak dinner and we're gonna have a CISO networking night. Well, you're buying them something there, right? The kind of tchotchkes that executives get, by showing up at these things, and the take homes are like they get a little ridiculous, right? But they're still used to get attention. So I think there's things you could do clearly to excess that get into questionable bribe territory. But at the end of the day, like, how are you getting someone's attention? What does that tactic say about you? Does that help build trust and credibility towards a meeting and a potential relationship? Those are the things you got to think through. Like giving someone sort of a fancy vacation or buying them something might get that meeting, but if you're not doing anything to build value and how you can help them, I don't know that that goes anywhere.
yeah. Then it's just the same as 50% of our marketing is ineffective and 50% is effective. We just don't know which one. It goes back to that. But I don't know if people still say that. That's really old. Um, I posted the other day that if you're a CMO at a tech company and you live in San Francisco, you could have a steak dinner every night. Like literally, it's a perk
Yeah.
because I think that as a tactic is very effective. People
Hmm.
know that we want to get our target market into a nice, restaurant and have a nice steak dinner so we can talk to them. And it's working out pretty well for all the CMOs in San Francisco, right? Because they get free food.
You get free food, but are really, really going to buy something from everyone there, right? And so again, like if you
Your
get your free
cholesterol, yeah,
dinner, you get your meal, and then someone does a crappy job of sort of pitching you, like
yeah,
that doesn't help anybody. Versus if you had a good meal, a good conversation, you learned something, you started to develop some trust and affinity with the vendor. Is that a basis for someone eventually taking a meeting? Is that a basis for someone eventually kind of putting you in the seat of favorite when they need to buy something? Yeah, yeah, that works. That's part of the way it works.
yeah. And it was so much simpler in the past times of I just give Google, $10 and I get $100 back in sales. Like
Yeah,
why can't it just be easy like that? But it's much more complicated these days, it
it
seems.
is.
Yeah. Well, Matt, oh my gosh, you did not disappoint. Thank you so much for coming and sharing your wisdom.
Of course.
I feel like round two is coming up. I appreciate it. Do you have anything coming up, assuming this episode goes live in a few weeks? Anything that you're excited about right now, and how can people get in touch with you?
Yeah, no, I appreciate that. You can always find us at heinzmarketing.com, HEINZ marketing.com. We've got 15 plus years of content, best practice guides, templates. We just published a new predictable pipeline workbook, like 85 pages that sort of lays out everything you need to know to be able to sort of build some of those predictable pipeline fundamentals. Um, yeah, no, we're doing a lot more work around what I'd call marketing orchestration. Like a lot of companies, as they grow, as well as they go to market motions grow in complexity, they're experiencing what Gartner calls collaboration drag. It just takes way more time to get things done. And if a focus on marketing orchestration improves agility, it improves impact, it improves speed to market, and it can really unstick some of those stuck projects. And so that's something we're writing and thinking a lot about these days.
Yeah, well, very timely. That's exactly what we were talking about earlier in the episode. So thanks for coming on, Matt, and we'll talk again
Anytime.
soon.
Thank you.